separate the two items. And the first one we should take should be the synchronization of the time of sitting. And thereafter, the other one, you can still take it, but in case you lump them together, if one fails, it means the two have failed. But let's separate it, take this other one, then go into the general principles, merits and demerits of the creation of the new committee. Bearing in mind the fact that we have a committee on foreign affairs, we have a committee on diaspora, and all that, and we can expand their scope of activities, and judiciary and human rights. But if we cannot expand their scope of activities, that's when I think we can now go into creation of a separate committee on diaspora. Senate President Emeritus.
On the sitting of the Senate, the amendment we are seeking to do. So I've listened to you, and twice or thrice you have mentioned we should synchronize with the House. I have thought there will be another explanation, probably a more scientific explanation. Mr. President, I don't know the basis at the moment for which we want to shift our sitting from 10 to 11 and end at 3 p.m. To me, we have more energy, our heads are clearer in the morning, and 1 hour into the day probably would have lost some energy. And I feel, Mr. President, if we work between 10, if we sit in plenary between 10 and 2, our committees would do better than when the committees would have to go and sit between 4 probably and 6 or 7 or 8. So if we don't have any reason except that we have to synchronize with the House, I think we need to look at it again. But if we have other reasons that we must change, that will be fine. But if it is just synchronized, the House may have their reasons why they sit at 11 and close at 3. But here I don't see the reason. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Well, the sitting by 11 o'clock was started by you in the 9th Senate, particularly during the period of the COVID.
It was during the COVID, reduced number of days, and then we started sitting from 11 during the COVID period. But the rule stayed at 10.
The COVID.
Yes.
Made it, our rule says 10, but we came and made the tradition of this 11. In fact, the only thing that we changed was to add additional day. Because during that COVID period, you were sitting twice in a week. But I said no, that since there is no more COVID, we should sit 3 times in a week. And then, of course, we also maintain what we saw, the 11 o'clock. But now, we are saying that we have not been able to justify the 11 o'clock sitting unless we reflect same in our rule. And the idea of 3 o'clock, in my view, is not correct, because it doesn't mean you must sit till 3. It simply means that we can even, if we don't have enough things to do, we can close at 1, we can close at 2, to enable our colleagues to go for committee sittings and other matters related to the proceedings of the Senate, such as clearances and all that, and meeting of government functionaries. So the only aspect of it was just to legalize it, so that people don't have the impression that you are sitting at 11 o'clock and your rule says 10 o'clock. But if we must leave it as it is, it's not a problem. But let's hear from the public. Yes, the leader of the Senate.
We want to make a very passionate appeal to our distinguished colleagues. Of course, I listened to the Senate President Emeritus, His Excellency, distinguished Senator Akpabio, and he was very apt. For me, I believe the issue should go beyond trying to reconcile our timing with that of the House of Representatives. As a matter of fact, there have been some days that we sat and the House of Representatives did not sit. There have been moments that we had sat for a whole week with the House of Reps being on recess. So that cannot be the fundamental reason. The fundamental reason, distinguished colleagues, is that as distinguished senators, being on this floor is only one out of at least the three principal functions that we perform. Effective representation on the floor is one. Our committee assignments is another one. Over 70% of distinguished senators are chairmen of committees. And then, of course, thirdly, we have our oversight functions. Aside from other things that we have to engage in our various constituencies and on a national scale, and sometimes on an international scale. The logic, Mr. President, is that a lot of times distinguished senators have reasons to go to bed late, and there is no point having in our rule book that our sitting time is 10 a.m. and every day we sit at 11 o'clock. Of course, there are some distinguished senators who will be here 10 for 10. But there have been a lot of times that even you sat here, Mr. President, at 11 or 10:30, and we had to wait for some of our distinguished colleagues to come so that we could form a quorum. It's important that we walk our talk. If our rule has said 10 a.m. and we have not been able to sit 10 for 10, I think what is most important at this point is what distinguished Senator Yahya Abdullahi said, the former Senate leader, that if we say it is 11, please let it be 11 o'clock. So I agree with distinguished Senator Ahmad Lawa that it cannot just be because the House sits at 11. As a matter of fact, he also talked about energy. If it's even about energy, our younger brothers and sisters in the House of Representatives have more energy than we do. So if they will not sit before 11 a.m., I think it makes sense that we sit, amend our rules to read 11 o'clock, rather than our rule book saying 10 a.m. and we don't sit until 11. For me, this is the basic justification, and I would just like all of us to see it from that perspective so that we can save some time.
This is what I would have said, but I don't want to be misquoted. They will say Akpabio again. Because I think there was a time that I watched the sittings of both chambers when we had the third term crisis. And when the question was put, he failed in the Senate while the House was still debating, and somebody had to run from there to go and alert the House that the third term bill had failed first to go for second reading in the Senate, and therefore there was no point continuing. I don't know if you understand. And so they now put their heads together, and then abruptly they stopped further debate because the thing had died, since it takes two hands to clap. So that is one of the reasons you could think of. And another aspect of it is the fact that it would be nice for us to go into a small closed session and discuss exhaustively, so that members of the public will not misunderstand our discussion. Then we come back and take the decision. So I want to urge the leader of the Senate, because this is not the main thing that bothers on the lives of Nigerians at the moment. When the Senator Mark was Senate President, and even the practice he met on ground, Senate was sitting at 2 o'clock because they used the morning period to meet with the diplomatic communities, to do a lot of engagements with the civil servants and public officers, and then they start their sitting by 2 o'clock. And so officially they had 2 o'clock to 5. And I know that many of you also would like to do the same, meet with most of the agencies, conclude, even open your public hearings before coming for sittings. But it's not for the public to know, because the public only thinks that we sit here alone. We don't sit here alone. We do a lot of other things off camera. So the Senate leader, as much as I agree with you, I still think that we should go into closed session. So to have 5-10 minute discussion before we reopen this debate. So if you don't mind, I wish that you move a motion for the Senate to revert to closed session to have further debate on this.
Mr. President, I so move.